you're going to take your 2026 language goal and you're going to logically dissect it. You're going to figure out what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve, and list out everything that's limiting you from achieving that thing. So if your goal is to have a long conversation, that's your goal, is to get conversational and have long conversations with natives in 2026. What's holding you back from that specifically? Is it your fluency? You're not able to string things together fast enough to be able to have a conversation, right? That's one thing, your fluency. Maybe you don't have a large enough vocabulary to where you're constantly running into the situation where people are saying things to you and you're not understanding the words that they're saying to you. That's one thing, a small vocabulary. Maybe your ability to actually listen, it just isn't that good. Like, you know the words, you could read them, but when people speak them to you, it just does not compute in your head. Okay, so there's your listening. Boom. You have these three factors. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to order them in whichever one's the weakest, right? The worst, right? Because when you work on the weakest thing first, it brings you up, because your language ability is only as strong as its weakest link. So when you bring that weak link up, your baseline of the language increases just drastically, right? So that's what you're going to want to do. Find the weakest aspect of your language as it relates to your goals, and you're going to want to hit that first. Okay, then you're going to want to move on to the next thing and the next thing. And you don't have to get perfect, right? What I personally do is I'll take an aspect of my language, let's just say pronunciation, and I will work on that until I burn out basically of that. I feel like I no longer want to do that. I don't work on it until perfection. I mean, you could until you achieve like a level that you're satisfied with or you're happy with. But me, like, I'm kind of like a perfectionist, so I would never get satisfied or happy with like my level in anything, honestly. So what you do is you want to pick one thing, work on it until you're just fed up with it. Like, you don't want to do it anymore. Now the idea of something else kind of interests you, right? Like, ooh, listening relative to this really intense speaking I was just doing, just having a period where I just listen a lot, honestly sounds really chill. Like, I need that right now. Then you switch to that. Or you're just listening so much and have like no more content that's really interesting you. Now you're like, okay, I'm ready to just grind vocabulary, grind speaking, and do like the more intense practice now. I'm done listening. I've already watched all this good content. I don't have anything more to watch, right? Something like that, right? So you're going to want to pick things based on your weaknesses and grind them until you either burn out with it and you're fed up with it and you're ready to move on to the next thing, or you're satisfied and you're ready to move on to the next thing. Whatever that is for you, that's what you're going to want to do. And you're going to want to keep building this staircase of moving your weakest link up, building the next thing, moving your weakest link up, and you're basically just staircasing your language ability up and up and up until you reach that goal in 2026. But the most important part of this entire process is that you start right now. I mean, like, you can end this video now if you want and just start right now. That would be the best thing to possibly do. Why are you still here? No, I'm just kidding. But let's just say you do it at the end of this video. It's fine. You want to start today, right now, as soon as possible. And the reason for that is that people often go into January 1st with zero momentum. They go into it with just motivation. And motivation is great, but it doesn't last, and it's not as strong as you think it is. Momentum is way more powerful than motivation. Habit is way more powerful than motivation. If you put 2 solid weeks in right now, in the middle of December, before it turns New Year's, and you've already put 2 weeks into attacking your weakest language link, you're going to come into this next year with so much more passion, so much more power, and just the momentum, right? Like, the calendar effect is a real thing, and that's what really holds people back in pretty much every area, not even just language. And you can take days off. That's fine. Days off don't kill momentum entirely, right? That's totally fine. You can take Christmas off, New Year's off, whatever it may be. All I'm saying is that when you're trying to figure this stuff out on the fly and put pieces together on the first week of January and something doesn't work out, then you kind of just get disappointed and the whole thing crumbles. That's what we're trying to avoid. You're getting all your trial and error and, oh, I actually don't like this method. Blah, blah, blah. You're getting that all out of the way right now by starting now. That way, when January 1st hits, you already have that clean momentum. You're already 2 weeks into attacking your weak link. You've already got progress on the board, and your motivation is just doubled, right? So do yourself a favor, do that logical ordering stuff I just talked about, dissect it all, and start right now. If you don't do that, then you're really not setting yourself up in the best position that you can to reach your goals in 2026. And for reference, a couple days ago, I completely deleted my English YouTube account. Normally, I just log out of it. I literally nuked it. I deleted it. It doesn't exist anymore. So the only thing on my phone is my Japanese YouTube account and my Vietnamese one. That's the only things I have access to. I could create a new one and I could just use YouTube signed out. Obviously, there's ways to go around it, but those ways have friction. It costs something. It wastes a little bit of time. It's a little bit inconvenient, right? I deleted Spotify. I'm not quitting music for the entire year, right? That's just a little bit unnecessary. But I'm deleting Spotify and re-downloading it again when I want to listen to music, right? And every time I'm done listening to music for that particular session, I delete Spotify, right? And I have to re-download it again. That makes me more likely to get immersion rather than listen to music, right? I had chess on my phone as well. I completely deleted that. If I want to use it again, I have to download the whole thing, sign in and use it, which is just a hassle, and it makes me more likely to study my languages in the meantime. So yeah, I'm completely locked in and ready for 2026. I'm going to make a video sharing my language goals of 2026 for you guys to know. But for now, do the steps I told you and make progress. All right. Thank you for listening. This is how you actually learn languages in your sleep. This is not clickbait. This is legit. And no, it's not one of those videos. This will actually work. Okay. So this is a 3-step formula. Step 1 is setting the anchor. Step 2 is protecting the system. And then step 3 is activation. So step 1 is setting the anchor. What does this mean? So there's been a ton of research on just general learning that's been done that shows that studying right before bed is a super effective time to actually study, because basically when you're sleeping, your brain takes that opportunity of when you're sleeping to consolidate and really store information in your long-term memory and to really just let it bake in, right? And so when you study right before bed, the information that your brain is consolidating is super fresh, right? And it's very basically able to much easier go through the process of converting things from like just studied to into your long-term memory for you to actually remember and be able to use, right? And so this concept is really the core to what we're talking about here. Now, this isn't for everybody, of course, but most people, maybe you if you're watching this video, do not very productive things before bed. They'll spend time scrolling or maybe playing video games, which actually makes their sleep quality a lot worse anyways, and we'll talk about that later. But what you're going to do instead is use that time to study your languages instead. A lot of people will be like, no, but I need that time before bed to kind of cool down. Video games and scrolling social media actually really activate your brain and make it harder to fall asleep. So you're not actually cooling down for the day like you think you are. But anyways, so if you can, if it's possible for you, you're going to use that time before bed for studying your languages. So ideally, you'd be able to set aside a full hour. If not, then just as much time as you possibly can. Okay, so let's just say you're able to set up a time where an hour before bed you have to like study languages. So what's really important to keep in mind here is that we're not stealing your sleep time. We're doing this an hour before you're supposed to start, like, falling asleep, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to dim all the lights, basically do your regular get ready for bed routine, right? Shower, dim all your lights, all that stuff. And then now, right before bed, you have this extra hour that you're going to spend studying languages. So for 30 minutes, you want to do deliberate practice. This is basically the stuff that's like racking your brain and really activating you, right? So whether that be listening and repeat drills, maybe even scheduling a tutor session, whatever that looks like for you, whatever deliberate practice you're doing. And this could even be like really intensive listening work where you're listening and then repeating sentences that you don't understand to kind of increase your listening ability. Whatever deliberate practice and like the most intense language study looks like for you, it could even just be flashcards. Do that for 30 minutes, okay? The next 30 minutes off the back of that, we want to basically calm our brain down and put us in a very relaxed state. Nothing like what we were doing before. Actually, the exact opposite. So the best thing for this is just free flow listening with your eyes closed even. So basically what I'm telling you to do is go to bed half an hour early. So basically you're in bed and now you're just getting 30 minutes of free flow listening immersion. What I would recommend doing here is either you like YouTube and Spotify, and I think maybe even Netflix all have this feature where you can set a sleep timer, right? So what I do is I set a 30-minute sleep timer. So you go to bed 30 minutes early and set a sleep timer, basically. You're not actually like, so just to make this perfectly clear, we're not listening to the language as we're sleeping. That doesn't do anything. That's basically just nonsense. And if anything, that can make it worse. That's why we're setting a timer so that the language or whatever you're using to immerse will automatically turn off after 30 minutes. That way it's not playing while you're trying to sleep. You're basically laying in bed, listening to the language free flow, and your goal is to basically fall asleep. So if you, like me personally, I do this all the time. I'll be paying attention to the language, and sometimes I'll drift off and I'll fall asleep before the language just turns off automatically with the 30-minute timer. Basically what that meant is because I went to bed 30 minutes earlier and I fell asleep before the 30 minutes had passed, basically I got extra sleep, which is huge. So do not, whatever you do not like try to stay awake and like keep yourself awake so you can listen to the language more. If you fall asleep during this process, that is like the best possible thing, because now you've given yourself extra sleep, which is so incredibly beneficial for not only your language learning, but your health in general, which is really huge. So your goal during this 30 minutes is to fall asleep. And it's a win-win situation, because if you get to the end of the 30 minutes and you're not yet asleep, now you're in a dark, silent room in your sleeping position. You've already done your nighttime routine, and now you're just ready to fall asleep. And you've gotten basically plus 30 minutes of free flow immersion, right? If you fell asleep while the immersion was playing, that's also a positive, because now you got your immersion in and you also got to sleep and fall asleep well. So either way, it's a win-win. Don't prevent yourself from falling asleep. That's super important. And so just to quickly recap here, this is what we've done. We've done our deliberate practice that's really going to push our cutting edge forward. And then after that, off the back of that, we've let the language wash over us in a very calming way. And then we've directly after that fallen asleep. Now your brain is extremely primed to consolidate all of your language learning gains. It's like basically the number one priority of your brain that night in terms of like memory consolidation is the language. It's not optimized to remember like random things that you did at work that day or like random whatever that like nonsense that you learned from scrolling TikTok. It's primarily focused and dedicated to acquiring language during that night of sleep. I've done this literally, you might not believe me, you don't have to believe me. I've literally done this and had full dreams in Vietnamese from doing this. Literally, like my entire dream, like literally 2 days ago, I dreamt an entire dream in Vietnamese where everybody was talking to me in Vietnamese and I was only speaking Vietnamese in my dream. So if my brain isn't using my sleep to consolidate my Vietnamese, I don't know what it's doing, right? So that's huge. So by following this step one, you're going to receive massive, huge benefits in your language learning. I'm really excited for you to actually implement this and achieve those benefits for yourself. Because from my personal experience, it's like night and day when I do this and when I don't, in terms of how much progress I really feel like I'm making during any specific period of my studying. Speaking of progress in language learning, if you want to make as much progress as possible and you want to develop the perfect method from yourself and you want my help doing it, the Language Learning Lab is a really cool place. It's the top link in the description. I'll work with you to develop a method personally for you, and it's only like $20 a month. So it's super, super cheap if you're interested. All right, now moving on to step two, protect the system. This is basically what we're doing to make your sleep as high quality as possible. There's so much information on sleep optimization. There's so many videos. It can be kind of a mess, so I'm not going to go into it too in depth here, but basically like the super basics for sleep optimization. You want to be in a cool, dark, quiet room, either quiet, like perfectly quiet, or maybe some comforting noise like Vietnamese immersion. Like white noise or something like that. Whatever comfort noise you find is optimal for you. Some people fall asleep with the TV on. Whatever helps you sleep is cool. But preferably dark or whatever comfort noise you have. Also, you want to be 100% sober. This includes like alcohol and weed, even though they actually feel like making you like when you're on them, you feel like you want to sleep sooner. It feels like it's easier to fall asleep. They actually mess up your deep sleep, which is even worse. So preferably 100% sober. This includes caffeine. So make sure that like there's no caffeine in your body. So don't drink caffeine even up to 12 hours before bed. It actually makes a difference. I feel like the devil is telling you guys this stuff because nobody wants to hear this stuff, but it's the truth for sleep optimization. And then also obviously like sleep 8 hours plus. So if you actually sleep 7 hours instead of 8, for language acquisition purposes, it actually makes a huge difference because long-term memory storage happens towards the later end of the sleep cycle. So, and you'd be cutting that short if you only got 7. So try to aim for 8 plus. This is where I fall short a lot. It's very hard. I'm saying all this stuff like 100% sober, cool, dark, quiet, all this stuff as if it's so easy, but like honestly, it's not that easy to consistently get this. And if you are able to consistently get this, you're going to be in a really good place. I'm just trying to provide you with the information that is important for you to be able to like work towards it. I'm not saying you have to be perfect, starting tomorrow or anything like that. And a couple bonuses to really protect this language acquisition sleep system that we have going on. Massive listening throughout the day. If you listen as much as possible throughout the day, the total amount of hours that you spend learning the language really do help when it comes to telling your brain during sleep time to prioritize processing language. And also exercising during the day also helps regulate your hormones and all that stuff for sleep as well. So that's just another bonus to like exercise and stuff like that too. So that's step 2, protecting the system. What about activation, which is step 3? You've just obtained all of this benefit during your sleep, right? Like this huge boost in language acquisition speed that you've just got from implementing these steps. What do you do with it? That's what I call step 3, activation. So I've talked about this technique before, but basically what I'll do is I'll put my AirPods and my phone right next to my bed on my nightstand. And so when I wake up, the very first thing I do is grab my AirPods, put it in, and whatever Vietnamese immersion I fell asleep to the night before, I play it and I listen to it. It doesn't have to be like you don't have to spend time finding the perfect content. I'll usually just replay the same video because I obviously fell asleep during it or it got cut off at some point during it. So I want to know what happens later, right? So I'll just replay the same video from the point wherever I left off. And so that's huge because basically when you first wake up, your brain doesn't really have like an operating language, if you will. Your brain is blank, and whatever language you input first, that kind of sets the tone for the day. And so I've found that sometimes when I wake up and I immediately put in the AirPod and I immediately get Vietnamese, I don't have any English thoughts for hours. I'm literally just thinking, inputting, and practicing Vietnamese that entire morning. And that's just huge. That tells your brain that it doesn't need English. That tells your brain that it can use whatever your target language is for a certain amount of time without using English. And even if you're not necessarily at that level, still listening as soon as you wake up, I found is a really good way because like you often spend like 30 minutes getting ready for the day, right? In terms of like picking out your clothes, putting them on, brushing your teeth, washing your face, all this stuff. And if you're listening during that whole time, that's just huge, right? That's just so much time that you get, and compounded over months, even years, is just you getting a lot better at the language. And I found that like doing it as soon as you wake up before you get English, I found like in myself personally, I just get what feels to be more benefits, right? And so there's the 3-step system. There's setting the anchor, protecting the system, and activation. If you try this, I can guarantee that you will be learning languages in your sleep insanely fast, and you'll be making so much more progress. And in seasons that I've done this, I've made so much more progress in seasons that I haven't done this. I have meticulously designed this method to get you fluent as quickly as possible while requiring as close to zero effort as humanly possible. And this is going to actually work. And I'm going to explain this to you right now. So the first thing that you're going to want to focus on is learning new words, especially as a beginner. In order to properly consume the language, you need to actually understand the words that are coming in, right? So what you're going to want to do is start with your favorite content, right? Literally just watching your favorite content. This is classic, the comprehensible input hypothesis. Basically, you learn language from understanding messages, right? So consume your favorite content. You're going to want to do this with English subtitles, actually. So we're making it super easy, pretty much zero cognitive load. If, like, for example, you're watching a French drama, it would just literally watch the dramas like you usually do with English subtitles and don't even think about it. Don't even actively try to pay attention to the French. Just enjoy. If you're watching an anime, same thing, just enjoy the content. But what we're going to do actually in order to extract benefit from this beyond just the individual case of watching the episode is when you're done with that episode, you're going to want to rewatch it again a second time without subtitles. Literally zero subtitles. And what this does is it teaches your brain how to understand the language, because initially when you had first listened to it, you didn't know what was going to be said. You're just like kind of watching for the meaning and the plot. The second time that you're watching it, now that you actually know what was actually said, your brain will naturally focus onto the words of the target language now that you no longer have that English anchor. And your brain, now that it knows what they already said, will make connections between target language and native language. And those connections will happen in a very natural way. I think this clip from last week's call explains the concept pretty well.
No, yeah, watch it with subtitles, like you said, so you can understand what's going on, and then immediately without. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic technique. A great way to get immediate comprehensible input.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like a lot
but
of people have this problem of like, especially like beginners, where they want to get input, but like the typical like comprehensible input content is just so boring. Like I personally, I've never just sat down and like full screen watched like a comprehensible input video. Like they'll be
yeah,
like, oh, today we are
yeah,
going to talk about animal. It's just so
animals.
yeah. I
Yeah,
can't do it. I can't do it. And then so that's on one end. And then on the other end, there's like just native content, right? And people can't bridge the gap of like, how do I immerse in native content if I can't understand? And so
yeah,
I think that's how you bridge the gap. And when I mean like rewatching, something that I personally cannot do is watch an episode and then off the back of that, watch that same episode again. That's a little bit too intense for me in terms of repetition. So what you can do, here's what I do. I will watch the episode, and then later on throughout the day, like when I'm at work or when I'm doing the dishes that night or something like that, then I will re-listen to it once I've forgotten a little bit of what happens. This is a little bit less effective because that meaning transfer is like less powerful, but it's still very, very effective. And you're still going to be mapping meaning onto your target language, and it's more entertaining that way because you kind of forgot the very nitty gritty of like everything that happened in that episode. And re-listening to it is quite entertaining, but also like a 10 out of 10 language learning activity. So that's option number one. Option number two, this is probably for if you have like the first couple hundred most common words under your belt. This is to watch it without English subtitles. Use target language subtitles or even no subtitles if your listening ability is good enough. And basically only do lookups based on curiosity. So again, learning the language, you're not even thinking about learning the language. Just like when I recommended in the last step to watch with English subtitles, you're not thinking about learning the language at all. What you're doing is you're watching with target language subtitles, and whenever they say something that you want to know what it means in order to understand the plot, then you look it up. And this is really fun. I've done this before. The words that you look up when you do this really tend to stick because they were like crucial plot points. And you remember, as human beings, we remember stories very well. And so you end up remembering a lot of words related to these stories. And the thing is, you're not looking them up for the purpose of language learning. You're looking them up because you're trying to understand the plot and you genuinely want to know what's going on. And that's why it's really important to watch like your favorite content that you really enjoy. And so even after we do a watch through with these curiosity based lookups, yeah, we're going to learn words from it, but you're going to want to re-listen to that again, just like in the last step, because this re-listening is really what's going to bake in that vocabulary, and not only the vocabulary, the grammar, and just the whole overall rhythm and prosody of the language. You really want to get baked into your system by doing this re-listening. So, in my opinion, it's really not that like effortful at all to do this re-listening. It might be like at first, it might seem kind of weird because normally you listen to music or whatever. But if you just try this for like a week, maybe two, you're eventually going to find that it's really, really natural and really fun. And you're going to look forward to being able to re listen to your favorite episodes and just you feel yourself in real time getting more and more fluent in the language, which is really, really cool. Next step is related to grammar, right? How are you going to learn grammar, especially in languages like Japanese, where grammar tends to be really, really difficult, especially for English speakers to be able to grasp. So I developed a strategy that is really, really powerful for this. Basically, you're going to want to find grammar explanation videos. I don't recommend textbooks. Grammar explanation videos by like YouTubers are really good, especially YouTubers that have like kind of nice, cool personalities that you kind of vibe with, right? So I did this for Japanese. I found like really in-depth explanations on grammar, but you want to make sure that you find grammar explanation videos with example sentences. This is the most important thing because example sentences really make this whole process natural and pretty much effortless. So what I would do is I found like this 6-hour Japanese grammar explanation video by this YouTuber called Game Gengo and another YouTuber called Kaname Naito. You can, if you're learning Japanese, you can search those guys up. But Game Gengo is the main one. He has like 6-hour long explanation videos. So you find like a long video explaining like various grammar points and so on and so forth with example sentences. And you basically just passive listen to that. So whenever you don't feel like passive listening to like a certain episode of a TV show, you passive listen to the grammar. You do it while doing the dishes, while driving. I would do it at work while I was like filling out spreadsheets and like making schedules, doing monotonous tasks. I would just listen to grammar explanations. And this is the key thing. This is what nobody else is going to teach you. What you're going to want to do is tune out the explanations of the grammar. The only thing that you're listening to is what the grammar point means and the example sentences. When they start telling you like, oh, you can conjugate this by moving this verb to the back of this and then moving this prefix and this suffix, you ignore all of that because that's too effortful, right? We're trying to do an effortless, natural process. And that information ends up muddying the waters and making this whole process more difficult than it needs to be. And sometimes even like focusing too much on this will actually slow you down when you try to comprehend in real speed. So ignore everything except for the definition of what the grammar point means. So like in Vietnamese, da is a past tense marker. Okay, da, past tense marker. And then you hear the example sentence, Cảm ơn bạn đã giúp mình. And then you say, okay, he said, thank you for helping me in the past. Okay, I get that. And you basically listen to the definition in the example sentence over and over and over again until what's eventually going to happen is that when you're doing your other immersion that I talked about earlier, like when you're watching your favorite content, you're going to come across those same structures and your brain is just going to automatically associate that with the video that you've been listening to. And you're going to understand it in real time effortlessly without even trying. So this is the perfect method to basically absorb really advanced grammar without studying it. And you get a better result and you learn it faster than the people who end up studying it for hours. I did this in Japanese, literally, and I was learning like N3 and N4 level grammar effortlessly, literally without trying at all, when a lot of people literally spend like weeks fixated on these grammar points and taking a bunch of notes and spending so much effort. I basically was able to effortlessly understand them after only a couple days using this method. So I'm really excited for you to try this method. One of the ways that I was able to develop a method like this that's like so effective for beginners is just my language learning experience. I've been learning languages and learning how to learn languages for about 3 years, right? And I've been actually talking to people who have a wealth of experience in my community as well. And they're teaching me new things all the time. And I really think that being able to be exposed to other people's experiences is what's going to really take you to that next level as a learner of pretty much anything. So if you're interested in hopping in calls with me and other members of my language learning community and learning more and getting a routine that's like designed for your specific goals and circumstances in mind, click the first link in the description. That's the language learning lab. You're going to learn a ton there. So yeah, that's the top link in the description. So with that, we have learning new words and learning new grammar out of the way. What about speaking? This is the hardest thing in terms of doing effortlessly. So there's a couple of things that I can recommend to you if you really want to go with like the zero effort approach here. In general though, to get good at speaking is a very effortful process. And so to make the fastest possible progress period, you're going to have to put in effort. But for the sake of this video, I'm still going to go over the most effective, effortless ways to do it. Let's go back to the way that I learned English. How did I learn English? Right? I'm a native speaker. I learned by babbling. As a baby, yapping nonsense. So I've found, and a lot of other language learners have also found this, maybe you've experienced this as well. When you're receiving input in your target language, when you're learning the language, sometimes you randomly have the urge to say random things, dude. Like you'll be watching content and somebody will be like "huang da," and then you'll be like "huang da." You know what I mean? Like you'll want to repeat after them for no reason. Like it's really weird. And I think this is what babies went through, right? Like this is why babies just start yapping nonsense and they try to repeat after their parents. It's a very natural process and it's very effortless because you almost want to do it, right? You want to repeat. So whenever you're watching content, this is even from day one, by the way, whenever you're watching content and you just find this random urge well up within you to repeat like a sentence or a word that somebody just said, just do it. And that's going to lead to eventually you being able to speak that sentence down the line and, remember it really well. So that's one thing, it's just babbling. That's how I learned English. Next is talking with a tutor. But specifically tell this tutor only to do conversations. So you're not doing lessons. You're not like doing grammar study with them, vocabulary study. No. Tell them you're only interested in having a conversation and for them to correct you whenever you get anything wrong. And at this point, you can speak English if you want. But whenever the target language flows naturally out of you, just let it flow naturally and don't force it. If you find yourself putting in too much effort, you can just switch to English and have them give you like what would be like the target language equivalent. So having that conversation, it's a very effortless process because you're only speaking the language when it flows naturally and you're getting corrections all the time, which is going to really like perfect your speech after doing that in the long term. All right, in this video, I'm going to be going over how you can build the most effective language learning routine possible without wasting any of your time. So let's get right into it. The first thing is the daily routine fundamentals, right? So in order to build this routine, you have to clarify your goals. So write down right now, like do it right now as I'm speaking. All right, maybe pause this video for a sec. Write down your number one goal with the language, whatever that looks like for you. And I'm going to be going over like different types of goals and how you can build based on your goal. So once you've written down your number one goal, next you're going to want to list out each component of that goal. All right, so each individual skill or each individual aspect of language learning that you need to master or get better at in order to achieve your goal, okay? And then you're gonna wanna order each component based on how good you currently are at that component. This might sound a little bit confusing. Let me give you an example. So let's just say your goal is to have long conversations in your target language. So the components that I'm including and that I'm ordering is vocabulary. So let's just say like this is number one, right? So your weakest aspect of the language currently as it relates to your goals is vocabulary. So you just keep running into situations where you're just not understanding the words that people are saying and you don't even know what they mean. Even if you read them and you looked them up, you wouldn't know what they mean. So that's vocabulary. Next is listening. So what I mean by listening is that you know the words that they're saying. Like if you had like subtitles or if you could like pause and like view them, you would understand them, but in real conversation speed, you can't hear them quick enough. That's what I mean by the skill of listening. So let's just say that's your second biggest weakness. And then finally would be fluidity of speech. So by this, I mean how quickly you can use the words that you already know. So if you ranked this third, then that means you can kind of decently use the words that you know. But in this case, in this example, this person's number one problem would just be that they don't know enough words. So notice that things such as reading speed and reading comprehension aren't on here. That's because this has nothing to do with this person's goals. So take your goal and then figure out like on your own whatever components are required to reach your goal and order them. Don't include components that have nothing to do with your goal. Okay. And if your goal is reading, we're going to get into that a little bit later. So don't worry. Okay. So now here's how to actually build the routine once you have the components and you have them in order, okay? The reason why I had you put them in order is because you want to work on your weakest component first and then kind of just move on from there in order to just elevate your entire language ability up, okay? So the first principle in building this routine is to always include as much listening as possible at every level, no matter what. So even if your goal literally is strictly reading, like you strictly just want to get better at reading, I would still recommend including as much listening as you possibly can, no matter what. Even if you're a beginner, like from day one, and even if you're like a very advanced, near fluent level, okay? Why do I recommend this for literally everybody's routine? This is because there are simply opportunities where you can listen that are not reading or study opportunities. For example, doing chores around the house. I use this example all the time. If you're washing the dishes, you're not going to be able to look up words, right? Maybe you could read if you have like an auto scroller. Yeah, fine. But what if you're like at work and both of your hands are working on like you're typing something and you're doing something like monotonous, like maybe just filling out a spreadsheet. Your mind's not really has to be fully in it, but you're still like your eyes and your hands are both occupied, right? Organizing your garage or something like that. You can't read a book or like online while organizing your garage. You just can't. And so there's just I can go on forever and ever. There's infinite opportunities that you have that are listening exclusive opportunities, okay? And even if your number one goal is reading, listening can still reinforce and help your reading ability. It's not going to help your reading as much as literally just directly reading, but it still will give you benefit, right? And if you don't do it, then you're just missing out on the benefit. I'm not saying that you have to listen 100% of your free waking time, but I'm just saying to acknowledge the opportunities that you have and take advantage of them when you can, okay? So always including listening. And then obviously if your goal isn't reading, you can obviously like intuit why this is so important, because anything besides like pure raw reading is going to involve your skill of listening, okay? If you're at a pretty advanced level, like for example me in Vietnamese, this is pretty low friction. It doesn't take much discipline to do, because you can just find content you genuinely enjoy and it's actually fun to listen, right? Especially like when you're understanding almost everything. But I've been there as a beginner. This is not fun. It can be very boring. It can be like you're just listening to gibberish. It can be frustrating. It can be a little traumatizing. You know what I'm saying? So this is very difficult to do as a beginner, or even sometimes intermediate, especially when the temptation is just right there to switch to English, something that you can easily understand effortlessly. And oftentimes there's more interesting content available as well, right? So some tips I have for you. When I was studying Japanese recently, my main goal was reading, and my listening ability was basically nothing, and the words that I was able to understand was pretty low. So I basically only had a couple of options. Option number one, I could just listen to some actual gibberish, and it's super boring. It does have benefit, right? But not even that much, and it's just so boring. Number two, I listen to comprehensible input content. So I listen to somebody say, Boku no namae wa. Like, dude, nobody wants to hear that. In my opinion, it's boring. If you can tolerate it, then more power to you. That's an incredible activity you could be doing with your listening. Me personally, I cannot tolerate like comprehensible input style listening. I never have, and I don't think I ever will. I just can't tolerate it. So what I did was I listened to explanations of words in the target language with example sentences. So listening to those top 100 phrase style videos is a super good use of your time, because you get those repetition of key phrases, and then when those phrases come up in your immersion, you can understand them much faster. Also, because with Japanese, my goal specifically was reading, I was listening to a lot of grammar explanation videos. I don't think that grammar is something that should be consciously studied too much, but what I was doing was basically hearing the definition of the grammar point, like what it actually means, him explaining it, and then kind of ignoring all like the really complicated nitty gritty stuff of like, oh, you can conjugate to this form when this rule is met and all that stuff, just ignoring that, and then listening to the example sentences. So if you can find a grammar explanation videos with tons of example sentences, just ignore the really in-depth explanations and just listen to the definition and the grammar and the example sentences over and over again, and you'll begin to naturally acquire the grammar, right? And you can do this like, I was doing this exclusively during like my work hours when I was doing like mindless tasks at work. So not only am I like, at work being productive there, but I'm also fossilizing and internalizing grammar patterns at the same time. So this is huge. No matter what your goal is, no matter what level you are, this is one of the most important things you could possibly do. Always include this in your routine. So this is the only thing that I would say everybody should include in their routine. Everything else is based off of your goals. So if you are more conversation focused, you want to focus on having conversations, there's this technique which I highly recommend to everybody called output SRS. Here's a clip of me explaining what output SRS is. Taking 20 new words per day and putting them in a spaced repetition system. But the main thing that I'm doing here is like, when I play the sentence out, it's an audio only sentence card. I play the sentence, I listen, and I repeat it to kind of just get my speaking back. So that's how I'm kind of warming myself up. And plus I'm getting 20 new words a day out of it, which is pretty good as well. So that clip was taken from the language learning. I can't take this picture today. Okay. That clip was taken from the Language Learning Lab, which is a really cool place. I do live calls every week where you can hop in a call with me and I go over like language learning methodology. That entire I think 30 to 45 minute-ish clip is available in the lab. And you can also just hop in calls with me, talk to me, bounce ideas related to language learning off me. It's a super cool place. So I'd highly recommend. Joining link is in the description. It's super cheap. I think it's like under $20 right now. So I think it's super worth it. But with that out of the way, let's continue. So yeah, output SRS is like a 10 out of 10 activity. The benefits are insane. And I'm going to go over the benefits in a little bit of detail here. So The reason why it's so beneficial is because you get really, really, really good pronunciation training because you're listening to the language and you're repeating it, and you can hear in real time where their accent and your accent is different. And you can repeat again and you can improve your accent in real time. It's super effective. On top of that, it trains your listening. Like, that's one of the really unexpected benefits that most people don't realize with this technique. Because in order to repeat as the native speaker said it, you have to be able to hear everything they said and hear it pretty much perfectly. And so that's why it really, really trains your listening. In addition to that, the act of speaking really reinforces the vocabulary. And so when you use the vocabulary, it reinforces your memory, which increases your retention rate of your flashcards. And if you have a higher retention rate of your flashcards, that means you're learning more words more quickly. So it's a huge self-reinforcing, self-perpetuating cycle that's actually just pretty much a 10 out of 10 activity that you could do. So I would highly, like, this is a must have in your routine if you are focused on getting good at conversations. Okay. If the current component that you're working on within conversations is listening, I would even increase the amount of output SRS that you're doing. So doing more output SRS would be more valuable. Also, this technique called listen looping, where basically you can do this during your output SRS sessions, by the way, but whenever you find a sentence that you kind of understand all the words in it, but it's just difficult for you to just understand the entire sentence, you just listen to it over and over and over again. Don't translate it in your head. Just simply listen to the sentence and try to understand it without translating over and over and over again, maybe like 5 to 10 times until eventually it just kind of clicks and you kind of understand it, and then you move on. All right, doing this over and over again will rapidly increase your listening capacity. And then finally, if you want to really focus on listening, subtitle elimination. But for a certain season, like a certain period of time during your language learning journey, just stop using subtitles. I did this with Vietnamese for, I think it was like at least 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. 0 subtitles, only audio. And my ability to listen just improved drastically. Before, it was so much worse than my reading. And now I would say that my listening is almost completely caught up to my reading just from this 3 to 4 month-ish period. So I would highly recommend that as well. So that's kind of the routine you can build if your main focus is listening. If your main focus is like output and like fluent speaking, then a couple of things that you can add on top of the output SRS and the massive listening, of course, is video recording. So I've been doing this in Vietnamese lately, and it's just been huge for me. So basically, you record yourself speaking in the language, preferably telling a story, like some kind of familiar story, or maybe even just speaking about a topic that you typically like talking about, something that's important to you and that you're going to be bringing up in the language in the future sometime in a more natural context, right? So record yourself speaking the language for 5 minutes, and then when you're done, anything that you said incorrectly that you can kind of like sense was wrong, or anytime you didn't know what word to use so you had to switch to English, anything like that, you want to look up all the mistakes that you made and take mental notes, write them all down, maybe even make flashcards of them, and then tell the story again. And then do the same thing, revise, and then tell the story again. And then you're going to notice that in real time, every time you tell this 5-minute story or speak this for 5 minutes on this topic, you're going to get more and more fluent. And by chaining this and doing this over a long term, you're going to become fluent in basically almost anything that you talk about, right? If you just keep practicing the skill. So that's one huge thing that I've been doing that I would highly recommend. Additionally, another really good way to do this is with tutoring sessions. This is kind of just self-explanatory, so I'm just going to move on from there. And finally, for a reading focused routine, I would still recommend output SRS, even if you're reading focused. This is because of the benefit that I mentioned earlier, where when you speak, you're activating more neural pathways, which is strengthening your memory, right? And another thing that I didn't even mention yet is that when you're reading without having accompanying audio, you're relying entirely on your own pronunciation in your head. And if you're not pronouncing things correctly in your head, you're going to build really bad habits so that when you try to speak later down the line, it's not going to come out as good and your accent's going to be kind of messed up. This happened to me in Vietnamese. So if you have any interest in speaking at all, I would recommend doing output SRS, maybe at least 10 words a day. If not, like if you literally have 0 interest in speaking, you never want to speak this language in your life and you only want to read it, then fine. You can just do regular SRS. You can skip output SRS, whatever. So if you have any inkling of interest in speaking, do output SRS. And then besides that, the only things you need to do are intensive reading, which is reading while looking up words occasionally. I would recommend like one lookup per page, and then extensive reading, which is just reading without looking up any words. So with intensive reading, you can do things that are slightly above your level and only do like one lookup per page or one lookup per minute. And then with extensive reading, choose something that's like your level, that's not too hard for you to read, and just go through it and don't stop. Just enjoy the content that you're reading. And the last thing that we're going to be talking about is vocabulary. If vocabulary is your main restriction currently with the language, more output SRS, of course. That's what really helped me have like a really high retention rate of the words that I'm learning in Vietnamese. And finally, if your main goal is vocabulary, something I call the vehicle method would be super helpful for you getting more vocabulary. There's a video on your screen right now that goes over the vehicle method in depth. And I think that you'll really like that method if you really care about acquiring more words and learning more words in your target language. All right, thank you for listening. The vehicle framework has two components. There is vocabulary acquisition and there is deliberate practice. And the goal of this method is to maximize the benefits that both of these things provide. All right, so first we're going to talk about vocabulary acquisition. So really the core of vocabulary acquisition is immersion and flashcards, right? And you can think of this as kind of like immersion being the really required component and the flashcards being the secondary component that's highly beneficial, but not necessarily required. Let me give you a couple of analogies. So imagine the sport of bodybuilding, right? Immersion is like lifting weights. It's what you do. It's the main activity, right? And then flashcards is like steroids, right? Like it's not the main thing, but that's really what gets you to that next level really quickly, right? Or soccer, right? Take soccer. Playing soccer in and of itself is the main activity that's going to get you better at playing soccer. However, agility training is like what's going to get you to that next level. It's going to really like skyrocket your progress, right? And so you can learn a language without flashcards. Flashcards is just one of the fastest ways, but you can't really learn a language without some form of immersion, right? That's why people will take classes for 4 years and do Duolingo for 8 years, but can't really hold a conversation, right? You have the core, which is immersion and flashcards. If you don't know how to do either of those things, or if you have any questions on what those are, I'm going to link videos down below in the description, one for immersion and one for flashcards. It's going to explain to you exactly how to do those processes, but I'm going to assume you know generally what those two things are if you're watching this video, okay? So you have your core, which is really what's driving your vocabulary acquisition. But what's really going to get you to that next level very quickly is by incorporating vehicles, which is kind of like the differentiating factor in this method. So what vehicles are is there things that you add on to your routine that increase your vocabulary without taking away from your flashcards and your immersion. So back to the bodybuilding analogy, right? Bodybuilders don't just lift weights and inject steroids, right? They do other things on top of that. Even though the main thing that gets them the muscle is, of course, like obviously diet. Let's just take that out of the equation. Diet, lifting weights, and injecting the steroids. They still do things like take supplements. Why? Why do they take supplements? Because it's something that's so incredibly easy that they can add, and it fills a role that just like the steroids and the weightlifting and the diet alone won't fill, right? That's really what we're doing. We're adding supplements. These supplements in and of themselves are not going to take you from like 0 to fluent. But when you mix them in with the immersion and the flashcards, they have a really good stacking effect and really take you to the next level. So one of those things is a word of the day, right? Like this sounds like really stupid and basic, but this is super effective. Not enough people talk about this. Just having a word of the day really helps. Or even like a word of the week, right? Like one thing that I've incorporated recently in my Japanese study, I'm gonna put a picture up on the screen right now. On my fridge, jeez Louise, I have a whiteboard, and on the whiteboard I do a kanji of the week, where every week I have ChatGPT give me a kanji with a couple specific parameters. So I want it to be within the most common 2,000 to 3,000 kanji. Over 3,000, that's a little bit excessive, but above 2,000, because the rest I'm going to learn just from sheer exposure and repetition and study, right? And it's a random one, and preferably one that has like one dominant reading. So I only remember like one reading of the kanji, and I'll just take that kanji, take the most popular reading and put it on there, and boom. Now, every time I walk past my fridge, which is a lot because I eat a lot, I see that kanji and I kind of repeat it in my head, and boom, I go about my day, right? That's huge. Like that really adds up over like, you got to think about this long-term, guys, over 2 years. Now, some people are going to say like, oh, this would be so much more effective if you did it in like a flashcard system, but I already do flashcards, right? And flashcards have their limit, just like lifting weights has its limit. I'm not going to do flashcards for 8 hours a day. Am I? Is that like realistic? So you got to find other ways to add in vocab acquisition that's outside of flashcards, right? And the stuff that's outside the flashcards tends to stick more, because the more you add into flashcards, the more stuff can kind of just get mumbo jumboed in that whole system. And the more that exists outside of that system that you're acquiring from like different places, they kind of have this unique feel to them, and you kind of remember them even better in a way, right? So that's one thing I found is huge. I literally have a kanji of the week every week. And one thing that I've incorporated in Vietnamese in the past, which I'm going to incorporate like again later on, when I go back to studying Vietnamese regularly, is just a word of the day, right? This is huge. So every single day, I'll just pick one word randomly that I find in my immersion. And instead of adding it to my flashcard system, I will add it to like my, just a random notes document on my phone. And every hour or so, I'll just randomly look at it, look at the word, and just remember it. And I don't even put the definition, because I look it up once and then I don't want to keep associating it with English definition. I literally just put the word by itself in my note document, and then I'll look at it and I'll remember what it means, of course, right? And I'll remember the context. And I'll just look at it and I'll randomly, like in my head, be making sentences with it and everything. And then there's some words that I still remember to this day that I learned from that process. So that's really, really huge. That's something you can just incorporate today, right now after watching this video, and you're going to make massive gains. If you're learning Japanese, for example, a kanji of the week and a word of the day, at the end of 2 years, will give you 600 extra words and 50 extra kanji that you know. Assuming you like are getting a lot of immersion, you're finding the kanji of the week and the word of the day within your immersion as well. That's huge. And it's literally free. Like it literally takes almost zero time. Like legit. Doing flashcards will take like a whole hour every day, sometimes even multiple hours if you're really going hardcore. This takes like no time. It's really fast, it's really fun, and it's really easy. So this is something that I would highly recommend applying, because it's just free lunch, right? Another vehicle that you can try is a technique that I've actually been incorporating recently with my Vietnamese study, because I've been studying mainly Japanese, but I'm kind of doing Vietnamese here and there in the background. And I don't want to do like a full-on word of the day where I have to like check it all the time. I don't want to take up any more space on my whiteboard with Vietnamese. So this is a concept that I've created. Basically what I do is I just do, I'm just listening to some content. And then when I come across a word I don't understand, I look it up. And then I don't add the definition or anything. I just put that word that I looked up in a Word document. I'll put a screenshot of my Word document here. I honestly don't even do this that often. Maybe like once every couple days when I hear a word that I kind of like, or that I kind of think I might use, or that kind of might be common, I'll throw it in that document. And I don't even review that document regularly. I only pretty much go into that document to add more words. But what I do is when I add the next word, I look at the previous words, right? And what happens is when I come across that same word again in my immersion, and I hear it and I'm actually able to recognize it in real time, I'm like, oh, there's the word for my document. And then I'll go in the document and just delete it, right? Because it served its purpose. It made me recognize the word in real time, and that's all I want to be able to do. So I just go in the document, I delete the word, and then I continue getting immersion. I found that to be like a really fun activity that's like genuinely like kind of exciting and enjoyable, that literally only takes like 10 minutes a week total to like kind of just set up and maintain. And it's helped me like really solidify like 3 words so far, but I've only been using it for like a week. Those are just free gains right there. I would have either added those words to my flashcards and had just a lot more flashcard reviews to do, or I would have eventually forgot those lookups, right? But because I added those to that random document, I'm able to remember them, and it's just huge. And finally, another really good vehicle that you can use is a tutoring session. A lot of people don't talk about tutoring sessions enough. They kind of just sweep it under the rug, but tutoring sessions are huge. They're really, really fun. You get really, really good interactions. And I find that the words that are taught to you by like another human, especially like if you're having a conversation entirely in your target language and they explain what the word means in the target language and things like that, you just remember it better. Like when a real human face-to-face is talking to you and they teach you the word, I feel like it just activates different neural pathways and you just learn better, in my opinion. So mixing that in with whatever else you're doing on your own is, I think, huge. And it's really helped me personally. There's a tons of words where I remember like I didn't even know what they meant, and my tutor just explained to me one time what the word meant, and I just remember them permanently from now on. So that's something that you could definitely sprinkle in. I'd recommend at least once a week talking to a tutor. There are so many different ways you can benefit from having a tutor, which I've talked about on the channel before, but this is just one of them, right? It's the cherry on top. And the final vehicle idea I have for you actually leads me to the next section of this video, which is deliberate practice. The deliberate practice that you're doing in and of itself can be a vocabulary acquisition vehicle. What do I mean by that? So to kind of introduce you to this concept, I'm going to first explain to you what deliberate practice is. You're basically picking the aspect of your language that you're weakest at, that you need to improve the most with, and you're grinding really hard that specific accent. I've talked about this all the time. So let's just say your pronunciation is really bad. You're going to do pronunciation training, and you're going to focus entirely on your pronunciation for a certain amount of time before you go back to just doing your regular immersion and flashcards and stuff like that. All right. So a couple of examples of how this can work and how this can be a vocabulary acquisition vehicle as well. Let's just take chorusing, for example. This is the first activity I'm going to talk about. Chorusing is very good for improving your listening and your pronunciation, right? So what chorusing is you basically, you listen to a native speaker say a sentence, and then you repeat that sentence after them and you try to get your pronunciation to match as close as theirs. So it's really, really difficult, deliberate work on your pronunciation while also improving your listening, right? The way I do this is I chorus a sentence and that sentence will contain one word that I don't understand. So basically what I'm doing is within my chorusing, I look up that word like before I start, like one time, and then I'll chorus for like 30 minutes. I'll chorus like multiple sentences and things like that, all with that same unknown word. By the end of that 30-minute session, this word is now mine. I know this word super well. I've chorused like 5 different sentences with this word in there. Not only do I have a better pronunciation ability and better listening now that I've done this chorusing session, but I also know how this word that I've walked away with completely for free, right? So that's something I'll do. You can do this with like multiple words and stuff like that, but like if you really focus on one word, I find that it just helps you really remember that and actually take something away with it when you're done with that, right? Another deliberate practice activity that you can do is shadowing. This is one of the more difficult ones to really acquire vocabulary from because you're not supposed to look up words or anything at all during this process. This is just for increasing your fluency. Fluency being like how well you're able to articulate yourself and how fast you're able to speak and things like that. So what you would basically do is take a long clip of a native speaker speaking, and as they're talking, you're talking right after them, repeating what they had just said. So it can be kind of disorientating because you're listening to them and then also repeating what they had just said. But once you get the hang of it, it can be a great way to increase your fluency. Another way to increase your fluency is just having conversations with people, right? Whether that be like in real life with a tutor or just like recording yourself talking, right? That's a very deliberate activity that's improving your fluency, and it's something that's very difficult that you can do, right? And a way that you can turn that into a vocabulary acquisition vehicle is by finding moments in your speech where you were kind of looking for a word to say and you kind of couldn't really put your finger on it. So you switched to something else, or maybe you said it in English, or maybe you like used words a little bit unnaturally and you can tell that you use them unnaturally. Looking up how to say it in your target language and drilling that after you're done. That's a very good way to incorporate vocabulary acquisition into this process. So overall, just to kind of clarify everything and kind of just bundle all this up in the end, the vehicle framework is very simple. You have your core, which is immersion and flashcards, right? And then outside of that, you're getting as much supplementary vocabulary acquisition as possible. And then outside of that, you're having daily sessions of deliberate practice where you're picking one aspect of the language that you're weak at, and you're really drilling that one specific aspect, whatever that aspect may be. And within this, you're also in and of itself making that another language vehicle. So this is how you're going to skyrocket your vocabulary and also get better at the skills required to be fluent in a language. All right. I've spent the past 3 years studying Vietnamese, and I've managed to achieve a pretty high level. But last year, I decided to add Japanese on top of that. These are 2 very, very difficult languages, and I think that my experience trying to balance them and get good at both of them as quickly as possible will really benefit you in your language learning journey. So let's get into it. First, I have a couple of fundamental rules. So rule number 1 is do not have more than one language below B1 level. I'll give you a little bit of an example to illustrate why this is so important. Right when I started learning Japanese, I had a trip to Taiwan that I had already planned previously. I didn't really plan to study Japanese at all during this time. I kind of just randomly decided to commit myself to it and do it. And it just happened to coincide with a time where I was also going to study Mandarin for my trip to Taiwan. And I spent a month doing both. I put Vietnamese completely on the side, and I spent a month simultaneously studying both Japanese and Mandarin from pretty much zero. And this was one of the most miserable months in my language learning journey. I did not enjoy Mandarin study at all. I pretty much hated every minute of it. At first, it was cool and it was really exciting and exhilarating studying both of these languages at once, but it got very, very old very quickly because I could feel like I had this burning feeling that if I really just locked in on one of these languages, then I would manage to make insane progress and progress really, really fast. But because I had to split my efforts and split my mind between these 2 languages, it was really, really hindering my progress. And I really felt that. And I really felt that frustration. And honestly, it really showed. Like my first month of Japanese study was nowhere near the amount of progress that I was making in my second and my third months. And this is the reason why so many like online polyglots who have learned 5+ languages always, when you go over their stories and look at like how they learned each one, they always learned one at a time. I've never seen a polyglot story who actually has like, credibility and proof of their accomplishments say that they learned 2 languages at once. And in fact, the legendary polyglot Steve Kaufman, one of his biggest mistakes that he's ever made in his language learning career was trying to learn Arabic, Persian, and I think Farsi all at once at the same time. He thought he could do it because of his wealth of language learning experience and how much he understands about language acquisition, but he just couldn't. So if he can't learn two languages at once, I don't know what makes you think that you can. Right? I don't know what made me think that I could, right? It's just not feasible. I mean, you can, but you're gonna learn so incredibly slowly, and you're gonna have, like, if you're anything like me, you're gonna have frustration with not being able to make, really good tangible progress, and just have this feeling that the languages are stealing from one another. So if you are introducing a new language, grind it to B1 first before you decide to add anything else, or whatever that may look like for you. Next is to be brutally honest with yourself. This is one of the reasons why people fail to learn languages and why people do not have effective routines. The reason is because they don't really ask themselves the difficult questions of why they're learning the language, ask themselves the difficult questions, what do I actually like to do with my language learning, right? I spent so much time in Vietnamese practicing reading, which is something that is not congruent to my goals, because my goals aren't to read Vietnamese well. My goals are to have conversations with my Vietnamese in-laws, right? And so I spent so much time reading, which is good. It's not bad by any means. It's not bad to read, but it's not directly attacking my goals. So I'm making slower progress towards my goals. And the way that I work is that when I'm making slow progress towards my goals, I have less motivation. And so it was kind of like this negative cycle that didn't even need to exist. All I had to do was just be honest with myself and ask myself the hard questions. So two main things here. Number one are what truly are your goals? Like, what truly do you want with this language? And number two, what do you genuinely enjoy doing? If you hate doing grammar study, you don't have to. There's other alternatives. If you hate speaking, like you're a super introverted person, you really just want to focus on getting input in the language and focusing on listening and reading, then maybe you could do that. Even if your goals are communication, you can just temporarily focus on the listening aspect of communication. And once you can fully fluently understand listening, then you can, more easily transition into having conversations, because maybe it'll be a little bit less awkward. Whatever that looks like for you, you kind of have to make your own trade-offs in that way, and you kind of have to pave your own way. And it's going to be different with each language. That's very likely to be the case. With Vietnamese, again, my goal is communicating with in-laws. I don't know a single Japanese person. I literally don't know a single one. But I really like reading manga. So with Japanese, my goal is actually more towards reading and content consumption. Whereas with Vietnamese, I don't even like Vietnamese content, and I don't really particularly care about my skill of reading in Vietnamese. So that's why these things can be very different. And where a lot of people go wrong is they try to take the same approach that worked with their first language and kind of try to brute force it with their second. And I'm trying to tell you, you don't have to do that, and you can kind of have a completely new approach. And in fact, you probably should. So those are my main fundamentals for learning two languages at once. Now we're going to go into the actual approaches. So approach number one is what I call intensely seasonal. This is what I did for my first 3 months of learning Japanese, and this worked tremendously for me. Basically, what I did was I completely stopped studying Vietnamese, completely 100%. Not a single word of Vietnamese was spoken or listened to for the first 3 months. Towards the last week or so, I started to include it again, but for the first 3 months of this Japanese grind, not a single ounce of Vietnamese. It was all Japanese. And this really helped me get my Japanese, because my Japanese at this point was pretty much zero. And this really helped me get my Japanese from zero to a place where, okay, now I can kind of comfortably read beginner content. Now I can actually even watch native content and kind of understand and follow the gist. Now I'm in a place where I'm in you could call me an intermediate learner, very, very low intermediate learner. To get to that point requires a lot of effort, right? A lot more effort than maintaining that point. And so that's why I thought this intensely seasonal approach was really good. So this is definitely the approach I'd recommend if you kind of have a pretty solid base in your initial language, and in the second language you're about to learn, you pretty much know nothing. This is pretty much the way to go here. So my specific results with Japanese, you can see the whole thing, the whole entire thing, by the way, is documented on my channel, like my month-to-month journey with Japanese. I'll link the playlist in the description, but after only 3 months, I was able to watch native content with around 80% comprehension, which is really good. And I was able to read and understand low intermediate level passages. Those are my results. But because I had a reading heavy focused approach, my speaking ability was basically non-existent, right? My listening ability was okay, but my speaking ability basically non-existent, right? And so that's kind of the give and take that I was, that I made and that I was okay with making, right? And with the Vietnamese, I made a video on this as well. When I came back to Vietnamese, my listening comprehension was actually better than it was before, not worse. I have a whole video explaining kind of why I believe that this to be the case, but literally 3 months of zero listening to Vietnamese. If you think it's because I have Vietnamese family that was constantly talking to me, that's not true. I basically didn't see my in-laws at all during this time. I don't really see them very frequently, but zero Vietnamese for 3 months, and my listening was actually even better. However, my speaking definitely did get worse, but only after about 2 weeks of speaking practice, I basically got to the same point that I was at before, right? And the rust had basically completely fallen off. This is the type of stuff that I would watch on YouTube, but I didn't believe because it almost sounded too good to be true. But in my personal experience, you can literally leave a language for 3 months and then come back to it. And after only a couple weeks of grinding, you're back to right where you were before, if not even better. So this is probably really exciting for you to hear, but keep in mind, I only think that you can achieve these kind of results if you go really, really serious on your second language, and if your first language is at like a very solid foundational base. And if you want my help kind of like designing that routine or like making sure that your first language is at a really solid foundational base, the link in the description is the Language Learning Lab. That's where you can join live calls with me and ask me questions. And I can build you a routine that's personalized to your goals, strengths, weaknesses, etc. It's super, super cheap to join. It's under $20 a month currently, so you can check that out if you're interested. But I actually stopped doing this intensely seasonal approach for a couple of reasons. Number one is just because I really wanted to get back into Vietnamese again. I didn't like having Vietnamese completely in the back burner. For the first few months, it was cool. But then after a while, like after like around the third month, I really started to feel like, getting back into Vietnamese. So then what I tried to do was I tried to do this intensely seasonal approach where I switch from 3 months of Vietnamese, 3 months of Japanese, boom, 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 boom. And there were two problems that I found with this. Number one, the progress that I was making in Japanese, because I was so new to that language, was addicting. And when I go back, I make less progress in Vietnamese because I'm so much better at Vietnamese than I am at Japanese. And so I progress at a slower rate naturally. And so that was really, really hard for me to have to adjust to the new, extremely slow rate of progress. And additionally, because Japanese was still such a new language for me, I'd only been studying it for about 3 months at that time. I didn't want to stop studying Japanese because I didn't want to I feared that I would kind of forget it, because I do believe that you need that solid base in a language before you can kind of ignore it and move on to the next. And so I switched to this new approach here, which is the learning and using approach. The way that this approach works is that one language you focus entirely on being a user of that language. So you basically only just use the language naturally. You watch content as if you're a native. You don't like watch easy learner level content, and you don't like grind flashcards. You basically just watch your favorite content in that language, and you only watch whenever you genuinely feel like watching, right? So that's the using part. And then the next part is the learning part. So whatever your second language is, that's the language that you're grinding and you're learning. You're doing flashcards, you're watching like beginner content to really try to absorb all the new words, all that type of stuff with the other language. And that's the language, the learning language that takes up all your discipline. Once your discipline is fried and you really just can't go anymore, you can throw on regular content in that learning language and just watch it, or you could switch to your easier language and kind of just relax. I really find that the best approach with the learning and using tactic is to kind of just quit English in a way, and where your using language basically becomes the new English, besides like work and all that stuff, the obviously, right? But when it comes to casual content consumption, your new language for casual content consumption becomes a target language, and whatever language you're learning becomes your new grind basically. And I've been doing this with Japanese and Vietnamese for the past basically 3 weeks now, and I've really, really enjoyed this kind of split. My Japanese consumption has been going up pretty fast, as it should, because I've been doing a ton of flashcards and getting a ton of immersion. So I'm really, really happy with my Japanese progress. And my Vietnamese is actually making pretty decent progress too, because I'm kind of learning how to use Vietnamese in a more effortless way. Because previously, all of my usage of Vietnamese has been very effortful. When I speak, I think very deeply about what I need to say, and make sure you use the right tone on this word, and all these things like that. But I'm really training myself to be more effortless with my Vietnamese, which has really been helping me make more progress in Vietnamese as well. So currently, this approach is working really well for me. But there are drawbacks, and there's very limited situations in which you should use this approach. For 90% of people, I'd say the first approach is actually better. But there's very specific situations in which this approach is good, and I'm going to go over that right now. So I made a video on this approach going from learner to user last week, and somebody commented on this. You can pause and read it if you want. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, he said that my vocabulary will really, really plateau, and that I'm not going to be learning new words nearly as fast as I think I might be learning them. And I actually totally agree with this. I think that by using the language on a regular basis, and by being very comfortable with using the language, and by basically not doing any deliberate practice, you're not going to increase your vocabulary very fast at all. And you're definitely going to plateau very, very hard. But with me specifically, I have a sufficiently large vocabulary in Vietnamese to communicate with my family. My main constraint is not my skill of listening, it's not my pronunciation, and it's definitely not my vocabulary. My main constraint is my how automatically I can do things. How can I speak Vietnamese with my brain off without thinking, just like I can speak English? Can I listen to Vietnamese without thinking, just like I can in English? That's the kind of thing I'm missing. It's that automation. It's that real deep fluency is what I'm really missing. And that specific skill set, I think, is trained very well by basically becoming a user of the language. Now, eventually, once I'm able to speak Vietnamese more automatically and more effortlessly and more fluently, and I get to the point where, yeah, I can speak without thinking and be very automated with it, and I don't lose words as often, but I just don't have enough words, or I'm mispronouncing too many words, then I go back to deliberate practice. But that's not the real bottleneck for me at all. My real bottleneck is just how fast I talk and how well I can use the words I already know, which this method is really good for. So definitely thank you to Victorg for the comment. And it really made me realize that this method that I developed, the user and learner method, is only really like very, very good for a very select few cases. Other than that, it's just kind of decent. And most people would probably be better off if they have a really solid base in the first language that they're learning to just kind of put it to the side like I did with Vietnamese in the beginning and just really, really focus on that second language. So with these two strategies for learning two languages at once, you kind of have two choices. With method number one, you'll make like 0 out of 10 progress in your first language and 10 out of 10 progress in your second. In method number two, you'll make like 2-3 out of 10 progress on your first language, still making progress. Actually, I found that my Vietnamese is still making progress, and I feel like no matter what situation you are, as long as you're putting in some time every day, or maybe even like a couple times a week to watch content that you genuinely enjoy and to use that language in conversations with natives, you're definitely going to be making progress, but just not very fast progress. And then of course with your second language, you can't make 10 out of 10 progress, so you'll be making like 7 to 8 out of 10 progress. So whatever you kind of like would prefer is what I would recommend you doing.